Hey guys, welcome back to the 401 Files. Before we dive straight into this video, I want to say a huge apology to anyone who may have tried to watch yesterday's video. So I do apologise for that. A lot of you tried to watch and realised that it had been taken down. Unfortunately, there was a very small piece of footage within that video that was used in a BBC documentary in 2007. Because of this, my video was flagged up for copyright infringement and meant that I had to take it down. It doesn't affect the channel in any way, so please do not worry about that. I'm still very much in good standing order with all the reptilian hierarchy here at YouTube, and the show will go on. So without further ado guys, please do remember to give this one a thumbs up, drop down in the comments box below, and subscribe if you haven't already. But also as well, remember if you can, please hit that bell icon, that's super important to ensure that you guys never miss a future video. This is The Conjuring 2, The Real Story, also known as the Enfield Poltergeist. You guys are going to really love this. Grab yourself a coffee, kick back, relax, and enjoy the rest of this show. Also as well, stick around to the end because I will be sharing some of my own personal experiences with the paranormal. Our story begins at a very normal looking house situated in North London. The address, 284 Green Street, Enfield. This address would soon become the site of Britain's best documented poltergeist haunting. During an 18-month reign of terror that started in the summer of 1977, Peggy Hodson and her children, along with 30 other eyewitnesses, including neighbours, psychic researchers, journalists and even the local lollipop lady, all saw and heard moving furniture, flying objects, unexplained knocking sounds and even human levitation. The activity seemed to be centred on the daughters, Janet and Margaret Hodson, with 11-year-old Janet acting as the conduit for a mysterious sounding, gruff voice. Like most of the hauntings, the Enfield poltergeist didn't require some significant event to trigger what would become the most terrifying case in poltergeist history. In fact, it was just an ordinary night on the 31st of August, 1977. The family were just about to settle down for the night when Peggy Hodson heard the two girls banging around upstairs. Peggy shouted up one or two times for the girls to quieten down, but the noise persisted. Peggy, assuming that the girls were messing around, fighting or jumping off the beds, decided to go upstairs to investigate for herself. On entering the girls' bedroom, Peggy found the girls, both Janet and Margaret, absolutely terrified and huddled up together on one bed. As Peggy walked further in the room, a dressing room table stood across the floor right before her very own eyes. At first, Peggy assumed that this was some kind of foul play, practical joke, and she attempted to move the dresser back to the wall, but after 3 attempts, Peggy was unable to move the dresser. Realising that something was wrong, Peggy and the girls went next door to grab the neighbour. The next door neighbour was a guy called Vic Nottingham. Vic headed back to the house with the family to investigate these strange banging noises. Vic instantly heard the banging noises upon entering the family home, and after searching high and low for the source of these strange sounds, Vic was no better placed to explain what he witnessed. In the end, Vic decided to call the police. The police officer on duty that night was WPC Caroline Heaps. Heaps described seeing a chair slide across the room a distance of about 4 feet. Caroline Heaps then examined the chair closely for any signs of trickery. She even placed a marble on the ground to see if the floor was uneven. The marble remained in its exact location and perfectly still. With the police at a loss as to what to do, the Daily Mirror was eventually called. The photojournalist sent from the Daily Mirror was a man named Graham Morris. Graham Morris would later go on to describe the assignment as life-changing. It was becoming very clear to Morris that most of the uncanny happenings were occurring only when the children were there. Morris stood in the gloomy kitchen and, one by one, the adults carried the sleeping children downstairs. The last one to come in was Janet, and suddenly everything took off and started flying around the room. Morris was hit just over his right eye by a flying Lego brick. Morris was convinced that the objects weren't being thrown by anyone present in that room. And just to be certain, Morris moved far back into the corner to have a better view of every person there. None of them were doing anything suspicious. Graham Morris was able to capture many great photos during his investigations at the house, but none of them would ever be as famous as the one he captured of 11-year-old Janet. Morris had hidden a special camera in the girl's bedroom. This was a camera that Morris could operate remotely from somewhere else in the house the minute a disturbance was heard. In the photo that you're now seeing, Janet can be seen flying through the air after being yanked up from an invisible force from the prone position. There is a very long and dark history with poltergeist activity, surrounding themselves with either adolescent girls or very young women. Some of these other cases include the Bell Witch of Tennessee in 1817, the Rosenheim case in Germany, and that of Virginia Campbell in Scotland, 1960. In cases like the Enfield, some parapsychologists believe that the poltergeists are the spirits of the dead. Others say that the disturbances are caused by unknown energies produced by the girls themselves. Whatever the explanation for what was going on, the family had now taken to sleeping in the same room, when in late October 1977, activity escalated. Maurice Gross from the Society of Physical Research was the examiner leading the investigation. In his time spent investigating the house, Maurice had already witnessed marbles being thrown around the room, doors moving by themselves, strange smells appearing from thin air, and a huge reduction in room temperature. But it was in early November 1977 that the activity within the house would really start to take a turn. The Hodgsons continued to report strange disturbances night after night, and by late October, the family was now at breaking point. The lead investigator, Maurice Gross, was becoming increasingly worried about the family's mental health. Maurice decided to send the family away on a holiday. After a short time away from the Enfield home, the Hodgsons returned, and so did the activity, with a vengeance. In late November 1977, only 3 months into the investigation, Janet produced a series of highly disturbing drawings. Janet's behaviour was also becoming increasingly unstable. Janet would often lash out, become aggressive, and appeared to be suffering with epileptic fits. Janet was becoming more and more aggressive, and during her fits of rage, Janet was also showing signs of phenomenal strength. As the investigation team struggled to battle with 11-year-old Janet, a doctor was eventually called to sedate her. On the 26th of November, a doctor came to the house to inject Janet with 10 milligrams of Valium. Janet's disturbing behaviour continued, with most of the activity occurring at night. In one terrifying event, Janet can be heard on audio recordings being pulled from her bed while still asleep. She was then thrown down the stairs head first and caught by Maurice Gross at the bottom. But nothing could prepare any of them for what was about to happen next. Maurice Gross and Peggy Hodgson were both sitting in the front living room watching the two girls play, when all of a sudden they heard the sound of a dog bark. What's even more strange is that the peculiar sound appeared to be coming from 11-year-old Janet.
I want you to call out my name, my complete name, Maurice Gross. See if you can do that. Very good. Let me hear you say my name again. Come on, let me hear you say my name.
That's not my name. Come on, my name's Morris. Let me hear you say it.
Morris.
Say Dr. Belloc. Come on, let me hear you say that. Come on, let's hear you say Dr. Belloc. Could you close that door down? Say Dr. Belloc. What is it? Just hold that one on. Good work. Now, if you squeak the bed, I can't hear you talking. Now, say Dr. Belloc. Come on. Come on, say it for me, Dr. Belloc.
Dr. Belloc.
Over the next few months, Janet would start to produce a gruff manly voice. Janet said that the voice felt like it was coming from behind her. The voice identified itself as a former resident of the house called Bill Wilkins. Bill had died at the age of 72, and when cross-examined by Richard Gross, he was asked the question, "Do you remember dying?" The voice replied, "I had a hemorrhage, and I fell asleep. I died in the chair in the corner downstairs."
I want you to tell me whether you remember what happened to you when you died.
Just before you died and just after you died?
Days before I died, I went blind. Then I had an hemorrhage and I fell asleep and I died in a chair in the corner downstairs.
The story of a dying man in the seat downstairs in the front living room was later corroborated by Mr. Wilkins' son, Terry Wilkins. Gross continued and also asked the voice another question. Why can't we see you? The voice then spelled out, because I am a GHOST. In yet another very strange and disturbing audio recording, we can hear two demonic voices that are almost arguing with each other about who should knock on the floor or make some kind of a disturbance to get Maurice Groats back upstairs. The weird thing is, at this time of the recording, Janet and Margaret were fast asleep.
Margaret, Janet up at our sleep and we're talking. Just Margaret. Bang on the floor. Bang on the floor. And they've all come up. Yeah. That'll bring them all down. That will veil. We are what they are. There's truth in you, children. Bang, going to bang on the floor and I'll shout. Gordon. Bring Graham up here. Yeah. We're all asleep. They are asleep. There's truth in you, children. Mr. Graves. Mr. Graves. Lights gone off. Lights gone off. Mr. Graves. Lights gone off. Lights gone off. Come on. If you don't come up and smash a window. Yeah. Bang on the wall again. Go on. Alright, go on. Guess what? Janet Margaret near asleep and without talking. Come with the crowd. I go back again. To the ground. Mr. Graves. Mr. Graves.
At first, the investigators had their suspicions that somehow Janet was able to produce this manly voice. In a bid to rule out foul play, Maurice instructed Janet to take a sip of water. While Janet held the water, investigator Maurice Groats placed a strip of tape over her mouth. What's astonishing is that Janet was still able to produce this gruff-sounding voice without ever spilling a single drop. Further examination showed that the voice being produced by Janet was not coming from the larynx, but rather from the false vocal fold, which is directly above the larynx. Using the false vocal fold in this manner can cause considerable amount of damage, and in some cases even permanent damage. It's very much a mystery still how Janet was able to sit for hours on end using this deep gruff voice without ever so much as complaining about a sore throat. Now I find this next audio recording very interesting indeed, and it's a little snippet of this demonic presence or entity talking about having these dogs. And when he's asked why do you have so many dogs, he says to protect myself against you people shooing me away. Maurice Groats quickly then replies by saying, but if we can't see you, Bill, how can we shoo you away? And the demonic entity or presence quickly replies with, praying to God.
Your friends go with you?
Yes, all of them. All the dogs, 68 dogs.
And what have you got 68 dogs for?
So that they can protect me from you killing me. They can bite your head off.
How can we kill you, Bill?
You can shoot me off.
Now how can we shoot you if we can't see you, Bill?
Back me into God.
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Bill.
I'm praying to God.
By praying to God.
The disturbances at the Enfield property continued until July 1978. Janet was finally admitted to Maudsley Hospital for extensive psychiatric testing. 2 months later, and Janet was given a clean bill of health with no signs of Tourette's, epilepsy, or any other illness that could partially explain away some of the events from the past few months. Upon Janet's return home, the disturbances seemed to have calmed down. Almost as quickly as they had begun, the strange happenings at the Hodgson family home had finally ceased. 43 years on, and the Enfield case still remains as Britain's most famous haunting, and to this very day has never yet been fully debunked. Wow guys, what an absolutely phenomenal, amazing and intriguing case that is, the Enfield Poltergeist case. I knew that a lot of you would enjoy this. I knew that a lot of you would get the creeps once I posted this. I did try to post it yesterday, like I said. There was a bit of a cock-up on my behalf. And it's not the video that I wanted to post. Like, the video yesterday, in my opinion, was better. But at least I managed to get something out, which is all that counts, I suppose. Paranormal activity, especially poltergeist activity, doesn't just start with the very worst. There's a slow progression over a period of time, and in most cases that first stage is normally bangs on loud noises that you can't quite put your finger on. Like, you'll walk over this room to try and hear where the noise is coming from, and the sooner you do that, it's over at this wall. And that's normally the first stage. The second stage is things like missing items. You'll put your car keys on the side, you'll turn around for 2 seconds, turn back, they've gone. You'll put a drink on the side, it hasn't fallen, you haven't moved it anywhere else, it's not there anymore. And then from that stage it goes up to seeing shadows and things in the corner of your eye moving across the wall. But then from there it goes one step further, and these things do start to communicate or attempt communication. And then if you are unlucky enough to get to the next stage after human interaction, these things normally start to get physically violent. Fortunately for me and my family, we never got past that stage. However, we did reach the talking stage, and many people in my house did hear this thing speaking, so very, very strange. But I absolutely loved the Enfield Poltergeist case, and I think the first time I saw this, I was only a young child. It was on a programme in the early 90s called Strange But True, and it had a profound impact on me. I remember, as many kids watching it, I'm sure, like, had a disturbed, I don't know, it was just freaky. Like, after seeing that Enfield Poltergeist case, being a very small child, it stuck with me for a very long time, and I'm sure it did with many other kids my age as well. So, but I said at the start of this video I was going to share some of my stories with you guys, and I've got 2 very special ones that I'd like to share with you now. I have so many stories and so many fascinating things that happened in this house growing up, this haunted house, and I have so many people that witnessed these same things as well, that I just love to be able to share these stories with people like yourself, like-minded people. So I've got 2 stories for you now. I'm going to dive into them really quickly. I won't keep you much longer, and yeah, enjoy. Okay guys, so the first story that I would really like to share with you is a personal one of mine, and it was the first time that I ever experienced anything to do with the paranormal. And I was only a child at the time, I believe about 4 or 5 years old. Now, as it were, my mum was about to get in the bath, and at this time it was around kicking out time at school. My brother and sister, who were both older than me, were at school, and she said, "I'm going to be locking the door. Do you want to come upstairs while I'm in the bath and play with your toys, or do you want to stay downstairs and watch TV?" I chose to stay downstairs and carry on watching TV, but after about 10 or 15 minutes, I decided that I was now bored and wanted to go upstairs to play with my toys. I jumped off the sofa, I knelt down in front of the TV, and it was one of the old school TVs where you press the standby button and it doesn't just turn off instantly. It kind of fizzles out with this black and white static. So as I'm kneeling down in front of the TV and I'm watching all this static just fizzle out in front of me, I noticed that there's still a part of the TV where something's moving. And it just so happens that that something is roughly in the direction of the living room door behind me. Now, I'm only a kid, I have no idea what this thing is. I don't know whether it's car lights, which wouldn't make sense because it's daytime, but I'm just not thinking logically because I am so young. At this point, all I kind of know is that something's off, something's not quite right. And for whatever reason, I'm not sure why this was, I didn't choose to look at this thing directly. Like, there was no point where I just turned around to look at the living room door. And in fact, what I did was stand up and start to edge my way back to where I'd just been sat. So now I'm back at the sofa and I'm sat down, but still very much observing this thing in the reflection of the TV in front of me. Now, in reality, this thing is over here in the left, where the living room door is. Now, as I'm watching this thing in the reflection, it starts to shimmer, and the only way I can explain this whenever I've been asked to is like a heat wave on a warm day. When you're on a when you're outside on a warm day and you look down the road and you can see the shimmering of a heat wave just down the road. It looked exactly like that, but vertical, with the shape of a head and shoulders. Then all of a sudden, I noticed, and it became very clear, that this thing was growing in size. It was either growing in size, or it was getting closer to me and giving that illusion. Either way, I knew at some point I'm going to have to quickly look and see what this thing is. And I made the decision to quickly snap my head and have a look. And in the moment I did that, whatever this thing was glided super fast across the floor, right up into my face. And I scrambled with every bit of energy that I had up the back of the sofa. I kicked all the cushions off onto the floor, and I jumped off the arm of the sofa, around the other sofa that we had in the living room, up the stairs to my mum where she was in the bath. And you can only imagine how hysterical I was. I don't know what this thing was that just glided across the floor up into my face, but it wasn't natural. It felt very wrong, and very different to anything I'd ever experienced, and never experienced anything like it since. You can only imagine how scared my mum was though when a 4 or 5 year old son is talking about something glowing and gliding across the living room floor. To this day, I still don't know what that was. Very, very creepy. But that was my first experience with the paranormal, and things were to get far more worse after that. Now, the second story that I'm going to share with you isn't one of my own, but it is one that my dad has told me many times before. So growing up, my dad was a long distance lorry driver, and he used to travel up and down the country quite a lot, often working really late or coming home very early in the morning. This one particular night that my dad had been at work, he said that he came home quite early. Everybody was fast asleep in bed, and like most jobs where you have to think quite a lot and you're active mentally, you can't just come home and expect to jump straight into bed and fall asleep. So my dad liked to wind down, and the way he did that was by having a quick cup of coffee and then head upstairs to bed. So the way my dad tells this story is that he'd come home after finishing a late night shift at work. It was early hours in the morning and everybody was fast asleep. Now my dad had gone to put the kettle on, he'd walked over to the fridge, and while he was bending down in the fridge to get the milk, he heard over his right ear a female's voice say his name. Someone over his right ear said, "Gary." And my dad said that all the hairs on the back of his neck instantly stood on end, and he just basically froze in the fridge, unable to move. Like, it was so natural, he said, and so real that he almost answered it. He almost turned around and said, "Yep." How freaky is that? Something from somewhere else that we are familiar with, we have no understanding of, knows about my dad. Has it been watching his movements? Did it know him from a past life? Is it a relative that's passed from his family, from his side of the family? Who knows? But that is just a freaky thing to start thinking about. And whenever you hear about these poltergeists or these ghosts saying somebody's name, or even speaking out loud and describing things in the known physical dimension, it's very, very strange, and it blows my mind, leaving me with tons more questions, because technically that thing shouldn't know my dad's name. Now, does that, like I said, mean that it's been watching him, following him around? Is it someone that knows him? What is going on there? Very, very strange, and I'm just so glad that that story, that particular one, never happened to me. Right guys, unfortunately that is all we've got time for in this video, but it's been an absolute pleasure just to take this time, sit down with you guys and chat about the things that we love. Hopefully wherever you are in the world, COVID is dying down. If you are in lockdown, keep strong, keep mentally strong. That's the most important thing. And if you are in a position to do so, then please do look after somebody else as well. That's a big one for me. But before you shoot off, please do remember to give this one a thumbs up, hit that bell icon, subscribe if you haven't already, drop down in the comments box. I know this is a lot to ask, but share the content as well, guys. You guys have been amazing, as always. Until next time, take it easy, stay safe. I'll see you on the next one.